All we need is love. Bum bum ba-da-dum. All we need is love. Bum bum ba-da-dum. All we need is love. Love. Love is all we need. I wanted to start out this morning with a little bit of a song and a personal story. I wanted to share an epiphany that I had in my mid-20s. I was doing a yoga teacher training, and we had this amazing instructor, a guest speaker, if you will, come in and do all of these cathartic releases with us. After we were done, we sat down and we had a notebook, and she asked us to answer one question. And she asked, "Why are you here?" And I wrote down, "To love and to be loved." And this was a really powerful moment for me because I was a really lost 20-something-year-old at the time and in a dark place. Yoga was one of the best things I had in my life at the time, and I was like, wow, it's really that simple. It can really be that simple. Like, that's why I'm here, to love and to be loved. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Jessica Disbrow, licensed social worker and registered psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. I'm also the founder and primary therapist of Higher Consciousness Healing. We're a small, innovative private practice in Lakewood, Colorado, offering mental health services. We're doing something a little bit different than a lot of other practices, in that we offer free online education, community building, as well as individual and group therapy. If you'd like to know more about our services, please check us out on the web at www.higherconsciousnesshealing.org. Right now you're watching our live video blog, which we air every Saturday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. We talk about different mental health topics from a spiritual and scientific perspective. So welcome. Thank you all for joining the show. Last week we talked about fear, what really fear is, the absence of love. Ultimately, an illusion. Now, what is love? Because that's the flip side. If there's no fear and there's only really love, then what does unconditional love really mean? Before I get into that though, I did want to make a special note because I noticed as I was rewatching my video last week that in the, shooting live is a little, I know I look really calm, but there is part of me that's a little nervous during every show. And in that nervousness, during the example of me going to Costa Rica and deciding what was my rational fears and my irrational fears, I kind of tripped up and I said I didn't really have any irrational fears, and that was totally wrong. That's completely wrong. And the reason why I got tripped up, feeling a little nervous on camera and then talking about fear on camera, our brain does something tricky, and our fears seem really rational in the moment. Just like all of the fears that were coming through my head in the moment of that Costa Rica example, well, they all seemed pretty reasonable because there's always a possibility that you might be killed in some way, but chances are that's not going to happen. And really, when we look underneath the surface of our fears, we see that they're usually irrational. And if we just use common sense and have some faith, things are going to be just fine, and even better than just fine. So today we're talking about, what does unconditional love really mean? Well, why discuss love in the first place? I believe it's the foundation for healing. And I don't think a lot of people would argue with me on that. It's really the foundation of a lot of therapeutic services. It's really at the foundation of the universe and all the healing magic that has to offer. So it's really important to talk about love, and I don't think we talk about it enough at all. We kind of don't want to admit how important it is sometimes because we have such a hard time with it. So what does unconditional love really mean? I've outlined 6 main points that I'm going to go through. And the first one being that it really means loving yourself unconditionally first. And I really, really can't stress this enough, because if we don't love ourselves, we won't be able to love anybody else. And that's really, really true. And the reason why that is because when we don't deal with the things that we are having a hard time accepting about ourselves, we bury them into our unconscious or into our subconscious. And we don't deal with them, we deny them. And then when somebody in our life shows that behavior that we actually don't like about ourselves, that we've buried, we react to them and get really upset with them. And so it affects our relationships in a big way when we don't put that unconditional love for ourselves first. So what does that look like? It looks like non-judgment for yourself. It looks like meeting yourself where you're at and accepting yourself right there. Radical acceptance, really. It's about kindness, forgiveness, and self-care. Taking care of ourselves is so important for that unconditional love. And these are really, really hard. These are really hard because we know all the things that we've done and we know all of our inner thoughts, and it's kind of hard to escape from those, you know? It's really, really easy to beat ourselves up. So if you're interested in learning more about self-love and learning to love ourselves, I really recommend that you watch my previous episodes 4 and 5. We cover that in depth and they're great episodes, so check those out. Number 2, unconditional love really means having strong and healthy boundaries. This is something that people don't talk about at all. You know, loving ourselves and others unconditionally doesn't mean that we let people walk all over us or take advantage of us. Let's not do that. You know, it's about having that love to stand up for ourselves and having that love for the other person to do it in a way that's kind. You know, we need to understand where they're coming from, give them that space, but ultimately not tolerate being mistreated repeatedly or getting sucked into a pattern that you play out with another person over and over and over again that doesn't ever really get resolved. Even though we can understand where both people are coming from, playing at that pattern ultimately harms us in the long run and does a lot of damage to our relationships. Number 3, ultimately, it does mean calling out those who are close to us on their BS. And when I say BS, I mean their unconscious issues, you know, issues that they're not really aware of. And how do we do that? We do that with love. A lot of love and a lot of kindness. And we look for that teachable moment. Because a lot of times people aren't receptive. You know, like let's say you have a friend and they have terrible eating habits and, you know, you've gotten gluten-free and sugar-free and you're doing so well and you're like, wow, this makes such a big difference. Friend, why aren't you doing those things? You know, it's not really helpful. You know, the friend probably isn't going to listen to you. However, if they come to you and they say, you know, my doctor says I really have high cholesterol and I need to start working on these things, that's a good time to bring something like that up. So it's all about catching those teachable moments. Really important. It's really important to not enable. And that's why we need to call people out sometimes and help them understand some of their behaviors. And again, remember, their behaviors are just coming from your perspective. So that's really important to keep in mind too. Number 4, unconditional love is all about meeting people where they're at. Exactly where they're at. We're all trying our best with a limited perspective. So it's about assuming goodness in each other. Again, goes back to that non-judgment piece. It's really important. Number 5. It's about forgiving ourselves and others. Having that level of empathy and being able to really understand where someone was coming from in that moment can really help. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a reason for why they did something. And depending on what your experience is, some people that you're with may be deeply unconscious and doing destructive things on a regular basis. So understanding where they're coming from, but ultimately not tolerating, being mistreated, and helping them to maybe see that treating themselves would be better as well. But the best thing we can do is be that example. All right. And number 6, because it goes without saying, so I left it last. Unconditional love really means loving without any conditions. So it's not about exchange or competition or expectations. And those are a lot of the things that people are used to in relationships. I'm going to say them again. It's about exchange. I do this thing for you, and that means you owe me something. Or I give you a gift, and I put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's not really well received, and then I take that personally. That's not really fair. We have expectations for how the gift was received, and, not good. And then the competition, you can see that with dating really easily. So when we start loving ourselves first, we find the ability to love others. It becomes more and more easy to love more and more people of all different backgrounds and experiences and just things you never even knew of. You're making room for all of those with love. It goes so far until we find ourselves loving in ways we never thought possible, loving everyone and everything in the universe. For there is only love. Fear is an illusion, much like the darkness. That wraps up today's show. Thank you all for watching. I was really excited to air the show on 11/11. I did not do that intentionally. I, have a main idea of the progression of these shows, but I did not plan on it being on 11/11. I really took it as a sign from the universe that love is really the most important thing. It binds synchronicity, which is 11/11, the repetition of ones. And it's all around us. It's in everything. And when we tap into that flow of love and we become part of that flow, things like this just happen naturally. And it's just so beautiful. Thank you for watching. Next week, I'm really jazzed to talk about conscious relationships. I'm going to talk more about boundaries and what loving in a relationship unconditionally looks like after we've learned to love ourselves unconditionally. Yeah. All right. If anybody has any questions, now would be a good time to ask. I'll take a minute. I have a couple of announcements here, and we'll give anybody a chance to make any questions or comments. It's getting cold in Denver, and it's like sweater weather and like tea. It's like so cozy. Well, I want to announce 2 things. We had our spiritual support group for millennials this past Thursday, and it was such a hit. We doubled in size from last month. Everyone came together so beautifully, and they really presented their full authentic selves. I just loved. Somebody even brought like homemade paleo cookies. I was like, this is so awesome. And we dove deep into what surrendering really looks like and how we can embody that. Next month, we decided our topic's going to be around intentions. So if you're interested in joining us, it's a community building and peer support group for millennials ages like 18 to 30, give or take. And we'd be really jazzed to have you. Check us out on Meetup. I'll leave the link on the description box above so you can check that out. Something else I'm really excited to be offering is next year I'm going to be starting a 12-week group therapy program also for that millennial age group. I'm looking for 11 young people to come together to create a really transformative space. We're going to dive deep into self-love and acceptance, trust and safety building, radical responsibility, so much more. It's really going to be tailored to who's in the room and what that group needs best. So if you're interested, definitely check it out on my website, higherconsciousnesshealing.org, and you'll find it there under the For Millennials page. Awesome. I don't see any other questions or comments, so I'm going to wrap up. One last thing. Be love. Be love. All right, everybody. Take care.